Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. In today's video I wanted to talk about one of my favorite 1990s issues, Amazing Spider-Man 361 in the CGC 9.8, first appearance of Carnage. And this issue, I think it's a bit of like a tale of two cities, I think, with this issue, where on the one hand you have a really iconic first appearance of Carnage and one of the most iconic first appearances of the 90s, I think. And such a popular villain and character and really well collected, so that's a really big positive, I think, about Amazing Spider-Man 361 in the CGC 9.8. One of the negatives, though, I would say is just looking on the CGC census this morning, there's over 3,000 of these CGC 9.8 Amazing Spider-Man 361s, first Carnage, over 3,000 of them on the CGC census. So from a collector investor point of view, at times you like to see lower limited numbers rather than numbers reaching in the thousands, and with this issue over 3,000 now. I did check this morning, just a month ago it was 2,900 and something, so there's obviously still a lot of these out there too. Yeah, and I would say as far as CGC 9.8s go, probably this book and Spawn #1 are the two books that have the most CGC 9.8s that I've saw. And it just goes down to, and I've said this before on the channel, in the early 90s, that was sort of the peak of the comic book printing and sport card printing bubble, and even the collecting bubble, I would say. So, early 90s, everyone was buying everything, and they were putting it in bags and boards and keeping it in really good shape, too, at that point. Whereas in the 80s, collecting didn't become as big of a thing yet, as well as printing didn't get into its sort of bull market blow-off top stage, I would say, or bubble stage. Okay, so let's kind of, talk about Amazing Spider-Man 361 here and kind of reach some sort of conclusion about, should you buy it in the CGC 9.8 with over 3,000 of them out there. And, first off, this video, is a bit of a celebration of me buying just this Amazing Spider-Man 361. I got it in a few days ago. Instead of doing an unbox video, I thought I'd just unbox it and bring it out with my direct version, because this is a newsstand version of Amazing Spider-Man 361. You notice it's got the UPC code there, and this one doesn't. It's just the direct version. And a lot of times with very highly printed books, the newsstand versions are really become wanted by collectors. Another book that is really like this is Spawn #1. Spawn #1 in the newsstand is $200-300 more than Spawn #1 in the direct version, and it's really because these books were so printed. There's so many copies in the 9.8 that collectors are out there looking for something different, looking for something more rare. And, in general, I've seen a lot of different statistics about newsstand editions, but I think in general they're about 20% of the print run. So of the whole print run of any issue, about 20% of that run is going to be a newsstand issue with this UPC code. And they would go in convenience stores and grocery stores and literally on newsstand racks rather than right to the comic shop, which would be all direct editions. So that's kind of the difference. And they're more rare. They're more rare, and so for Amazing Spider-Man 361, a book that there is a lot of CGC 9.8s in, I would really recommend to go after the newsstand edition. And I think over time it could be a little bit of a situation of like a Spawn #1, where over time the newsstand version could be worth significantly more than the direct version. And right now, you're not seeing that. Specifically, we could talk about price here. I bought my Amazing Spider-Man 361 newsstand version about 2 weeks ago for about $407. And literally that same week, another Carnage, same issue in the direct version, sold for $405. And, a lot of the times with Amazing Spider-Man 361, another thing that I'll mention is you want to be picky on centering, I think. Because there's so many of these copies out there, so you want to be a little more picky. You don't want to off-center 9.8, which there are quite a few out there. So if you notice here, Both of my Amazing Spider-Man 361s are really well centered. really nicely centered. If you see the back here, it's kind of a yellow-brown back cover. So if they're not centered, you get like a yellow-brown strip on the side of the comic, and that doesn't look, very eye-appealing. And some 9.8s have that. So, because there's over 3,000 indies in the CGC 9.8, I would totally recommend to be picky. To, look for those newsstand versions, make sure the issue is perfectly centered. Also, a lot of these books come up for auction quite often, like several per month, I would say. So you really want to be patient too. Don't overbid for an auction because you feel like you need to win it, because next month there's going to be that exact same book popping up in an auction too, and you'll have another chance. So you can be really extra patient too if you're being picky, like I'm recommending on getting a perfectly centered one and searching out those newsstand editions. Yeah, because personally for Amazing Spider-Man 361, if you really, really, really like Carnage like I do, I got a direct edition. That was the first one I got, and then I got a newsstand edition just a couple weeks ago. If you really like Carnage, you can certainly go for the direct edition. And in the direct, I just said literally a few days before this one, a direct sold for $405, and I got this one for $407. And I believe the $405 in the direct version wasn't even well centered. Like, I would have not bid on it. And there's stories, and I've seen every now and then this book kind of flow through in the CGC 9.8 at around $300 to $350 in the direct version. So, if you're a bit on a budget, you can maybe look for a direct version in that $300 to $350 range. But if you're not on a budget and you can spend maybe an extra $100, I would really search down these newsstand versions of this book, because again, I think over time there could be a widening of the price gap between the direct version and the newsstand version, similar to a Spawn #1. Like a Spawn #1 is about $100. A Spawn #1 in the newsstand is about $350 to $400. Whereas this book it hasn't got to that point yet at all. Like I said, I bought this for $407, a direct version sold for $405. So the price gap hasn't got, that big yet between the newsstand and the direct version. So you can go after the newsstand, I think, and be more patient. But, just concluding up a little bit here, first Carnage, even though there are over 3,000 in the CGC 9.8, I think this is a book you need to buy. It's, in a comparison, not a direct comparison, but a good comparison, I think, is Incredible Hulk 181. A lot of collectors, Bronze Age, Silver Age collectors, say that Incredible Hulk 181, there's so many of them. Like, it's a well-printed book, there's a lot out there. It's not rare, it's not, it's not hard to find at all. Yet, the prices have just skyrocketed. And I think it's because it's really got that iconic first appearance, obviously first Wolverine. This one, I think, has an iconic first appearance as well, Carnage. And despite the numbers, over 3,000, which I personally don't really like, I like searching out those first appearances with like 100 or 200 copies. Like, those are some of my favorite type of books to buy. This is a little bit on the other end, though. So popular, so iconic, first appearance, so many copies. There's a really healthy, high volume market out there for Carnage comics too, whereas that's another thing I like about, if you bought Carnage, this comic, is you could sell it easy. You could really sell it easy. There's a lot of interest, a lot of volume in the market for this issue, whereas, if you kind of go what I just sort of recommended, like a more limited number type of first appearance, a lot of times on the way out when you want to sell those issues, they become quite hard to sell because they're not as popular, even though there's, like a book I had just purchased was Detective 583, First Scarface and Ventriloquist, a Batman villain, and there's less than 100 of those on the census. There's like 83. So really cool, really limited numbers, but there's not very many Scarface and Ventriloquist fans out there compared to Carnage. Like, there's just tons of Carnage fans out there. So, I think, Carnage fans, it's right in my age group. I'm 34. So I think as, Carnage fans like me hit that 40, being 40 and you've had a good job for quite a while and maybe you're saving some money, then people are going to really come out of the woodwork and I think, push this book up similar to how Incredible Hulk 181 has gone up. Maybe not to that extent, but I think over time, this book will still go up, even though on the census it kind of looks bad, for lack of a better word. There are a lot of copies. But yeah, you know what? I think this is one where you just, instead of focusing on, being over 3,000, you just really have to focus on how this character is so iconic and how Carnage is so popular and how the market is just thriving for them. Like, every Carnage comic you put up gets 30 or 40 bids throughout the week, which is a lot. Usually it's more around 20. So yeah, this is one where I don't think you need to fight it. I don't think this is like, a bubble or anything, and we're in between Venom movies now, so that's another cool thing, is I don't think there's very much hype at all, whereas once the Venom 2 trailer hits and there's some Carnage hints in that trailer with Woody Harrelson playing Carnage, I think these will do really good in that environment. And I'm not even buying them for that, though. I'm more of a long-term guy. Yeah, I just think it has a chance of being sort of the Copper Age Incredible Hulk 181. Again, just because Carnage is so popular, like Wolverine, and even though there's a lot of issues like Incredible Hulk 181, that just adds to kind of the thriving market, and there's a lot out there. So if someone came in with a lot of money and really wanted Carnage comics and wanted to buy like 10 of them, they could do that online. There's always so many Carnages, whereas most books you gotta be really patient. Okay, I think we about hashed it out. So, what I would recommend with Amazing Spider-Man 361 is, even though there's a lot of copies, I would still buy it. I would be really picky. I would be really patient. I would look for one that's perfectly centered. And I would pretty much try to buy newsstand versions, because I think over time that gap between newsstand and direct is going to widen a little bit more, like a Spawn #1. And yeah, like I said, I in the same week I paid for this newsstand, the same price went for a direct version. So I think you can pick up a newsstand, and I bought it for $407 American. So if you could pick up a newsstand in that $400 range, maybe even a little bit less, I think that's a really good buy for a comic like this. First Carnage, and if you're a Carnage fan, just go out and buy them because they're awesome to have. Great pride of ownership. CGC 9.8 sell really easy, so if you couldn't afford these, look at some raw copies. That's what I'd probably recommend. Raw copies in the best grade. But early 90s books, I usually always recommend to go with the CGC 9.8s because so many printed, so many, either a raw copy or a CGC 9.8. Especially for early 90s books, because again, there's so many of them. Alrighty, that'll be all for today's video, and I'd invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8 here. And I had a little bit of internet issues this week, actually, so this week kind of on like a 2 to 3 videos for this week, but next week I'll be back. Today we got the internet all sorted up, so we're good there. Thank you very much for watching the video today, and I'll see you on the next one.